James Whitey Bulger, the infamous Boston crime boss and leader of the Winter Hill Gang, was a notorious gangster convicted in 2013 for 11 murders, including those of Paul McGonagle, Edward Connors, Thomas King, and Deborah Hussey, alongside racketeering, extortion, and drug trafficking. His reign of terror spanned the 1970s and 1980s, marked by brutal killings and a secret life as an FBI informant. In this documentary, we delve into Bulger's chilling crimes through the lens of psychology and psychoanalysis to uncover what drove this ruthless mobster to murder. Why focus on Whitey Bulger? His murders weren't just violent. They were calculated, personal, and steeped in a twisted psyche that blended charm with savagery, making him a prime subject for psychological dissection. His methods were horrifyingly deliberate, strangling Deborah Hussey, his associate stepdaughter, and pulling her teeth to hide her identity for the mob museum, or gunning down Brian Halloran and Michael Donahue in a hail of bullets on a Boston waterfront in 1982, blood pooling as Donahue's truck rolled to a stop for the New York Times. Bulger tortured Arthur Bucky Barrett for hours, shot him, and buried him in a basement, per Wikipedia. These weren't just killings, they were performances of power, dripping with cruelty, begging for a deep dive into the mind of a man who thrived on control and betrayal. Let's step back to South Boston in 1929, where James Joseph Bulger Jr. was born into a working-class Irish Catholic family, one of 6 kids raised in a cramped housing project. His father, a longshoreman who lost an arm in an accident, struggled to provide for Britannica. Nicknamed Whitey for his blonde hair, a name he despised, Bulger was a scrappy kid, always fighting, always defiant. By 14, he was running with the Shamrocks gang, arrested for larceny and assault, per EBSCO. Psychoanalysis points to attachment theory. Growing up in poverty with a father diminished by injury likely bred a deep need for control, a way to escape feeling powerless. His unruly streak, per biography.com, suggests early signs of antisocial personality disorder, where empathy is scarce and rules are just obstacles. Bulger never finished high school, dropping out to chase trouble. At 18, he joined the U.S. Air Force, but his violent streak followed, arrested for going AWOL and fighting, per Wikipedia. Discharged in 1952, he returned to Boston, escalating from theft to bank robbery, landing in federal prison by 1956. There, he endured CIA's MKUltra LSD experiments, per PBS News, which left with nightmares and hallucinations, per juror Janet Uller's letters from Bulger. Psychoanalytically, this trauma likely deepened his paranoia and rage, fueling a narcissistic personality disorder where he craved admiration and invincibility, per DSM-5. His prison time didn't reform him, it hardened him, per biography.com, setting the stage for his rise in the Winter Hill Gang. Bulger's victims weren't random. They were threats to his empire or ego. Paul McGonagle, a rival gang leader, was shot in 1974 for challenging Bulger's turf, for the Mob Museum. Edward Connors, killed in 1975, was suspected of talking too much, per Wikipedia. Brian Halloran, an informant, and Michael Donahue, an innocent bystander, were sprayed with bullets in 1982 to silence Halloran's FBI leaks, for the New York Times. Deborah Hussey and Deborah Davis, both linked to associate Stephen Flemmi, were strangled in 1981 and 1985, respectively, for knowing too much, per The Guardian. Psychologically, this screams narcissistic rage. Bulger's grandiose self-image couldn't tolerate betrayal, per DSM-5. Killing informants was personal. He saw them as mirrors of his own duplicity as an FBI informant, per EBSCO. Psychoanalytically, Bulger's victim selection was projection. He destroyed those who embodied his own fears of weakness or exposure. Women like Hussey and Davis, per Flemmi's testimony, were killed to control Flemmi and maintain Bulger's dominance. His paranoia, amplified by MKUltra trauma, per PBS News, made him see enemies everywhere, justifying preemptive strikes. His choice of informant and rivals reflects a sadistic streak, per DSM-5, where killing restored a sense of power. Bulger's double life as an informant, per Wikipedia, added a layer of hypocrisy, killing rats while being one himself, a contradiction that fueled his rage and need to dominate. Bulger's killings were brutal, calculated, and personal. Take Arthur Bucky Barrett in 1983. Lured to a house, tortured for hours over $600,000 in loot, then shot in the head, his body buried in the basement, per Wikipedia. Stephen Flemmi testified, for the Mob Museum, that Bulger strangled Deborah Hussey in 1985, snapping her neck with his bare hands, then had her teeth yanked out to thwart identification. In 1982, Brian Halloran and Michael Donahue were ambushed in a car on Boston's waterfront, machine-gunned as Halloran begged for his life, for the New York Times. Bulger's crew, per Kevin Weeks' testimony, dismembered bodies and dumped them in shallow graves or rivers, erasing evidence with chilling precision. The 1981 murder of Deborah Davis was gruesome. Flemmi claimed Bulger strangled her while he watched her body disposed of in a secret grave, per The Guardian. Bulger's methods, strangulation, shooting, torture, were hands-on, per Crime Museum, reflecting a sadistic need to feel his victims' fear. His use of informants to target rivals, per EBSCO, made his kill strategic, but the violence was personal, a way to assert godlike control. Witnesses described scenes of horror. Patricia Donahue, widow of Michael Donahue, told the New York Times there was blood everywhere his truck shot to pieces. Bulger's calm after killings, napping post-murder, per BBC News, shows a chilling detachment, a hallmark of ASPD. What pushed Bulger to this? His childhood poverty and father's weakness, per Britannica, left a void, fostering a persecutory complex where he saw threats everywhere. The MKUltra experiments, per PBS News, likely triggered a post-traumatic stress response, amplifying paranoia and sleeplessness, which he admitted to juror Janet Uller. MPD drove his need for admiration. His Robin Hood image in South Boston, per The Guardian, was a mask for a fragile ego. ASPD explains his lack of remorse. Murder was just business, per Tom Foley CNN quote, calling him a sociopathic killer. His FBI informant role, starting in 1975, per Wikipedia, fed his God complex, letting him manipulate law enforcement while killing rivals. The addiction model fits. Each murder reinforces power, escalating from street fights to orchestrating hits, per the Mob Museum. Psychoanalytically, his killings were displacement, channeling rage from his powerless youth onto rivals and informants, rewriting his story as untouchable. His charisma, per EBSCO, hit a monster, charming FBI agents while ordering deaths. His paranoia grew as his empire did, per Kevin Weeks' testimony, fearing betrayal even from allies like Flemmi. This led to his reckless trust in FBI handler John Connolly, per Wikipedia, whose tip-off let him flee in 1994, a move that delayed but didn't stop his downfall. The voices of those touched by Bulger's reign are raw. Patricia Donahue, whose husband was killed with Halloran, told the New York Times, "I waited years for justice, hearing his name everywhere." Stephen Davis, brother of Deborah Davis, said to The Guardian, "He took my sister, and I'm glad he's gone." Kevin Weeks, per Wikipedia, described Bulger's calm after murders. He'd kill, then nap like it was nothing. A South Boston resident, per BBC News, recalled, "Whitey was a hero to some, but we knew the blood behind the charm." The FBI's corruption, per EBSCO, shielded Bulger, letting him kill with impunity, costing the government $20 million in victim payouts, per BBC News. The 2013 trial was a circus. Bulger, defiant, yelled at witnesses, denying he was an informant, per the Mob Museum. Flemmi's testimony, per The Guardian, detailed Bulger strangling women, his hands steady as their lives faded. The public, per the New York Times, was split. Some saw him as a folk hero, others a devil. Media frenzy, per biography.com, fueled his myth, but victims' families, like Donahue's, lived in fear, haunted by his shadow. Bulger's charisma masked a killer, but the blood on Boston streets in basements told the truth. Bulger's empire fell in 2011, after 16 years on the run. Tipped off by FBI handler John Connolly in 1994, he was caught in Santa Monica, California, living as Charlie Gasco with $822,000 and 30 guns hidden in his apartment, per biography.com. A neighbor, Anna Bjornsdottir, recognized him from a news report, per BBC News, leading to his arrest on June 22nd, 2011. In 2013, convicted of 31 counts, including 11 murders. He got 2 life sentences plus 5 years for the New York Times. On October 30th, 2018, hours after transfer to USP Hazleton, he was beaten to death by inmates, including Foscio's Freddie Hayes, with a lock and a sock, per NBC News. His body, unrecognizable, was found at 8:20 a.m. per the New York Times. Philosophically, Bulger's life is hubris incarnate. Nietzsche's with a power fits. His drive to dominate blinded him to his flaws, per EBSCO. Sartre's bad faith applies. He lived a lie, posing as a protector while betraying everyone, denying his informant role to maintain his myth. His death, per a Boston Globe columnist, was poetic. A rat killed by those who hated rats. His story asks, what happens when corruption and ego override morality? Bulger's legacy, a broken FBI, grieving families, but a mob museum, shows power built on blood collapses, a warning of unchecked ambition. Whitey Bulger's 11 confirmed murders, strangulations, shootings, tortures, reveal a psyche warped by trauma, narcissism, and a thirst for control. The image of Deborah Hussey's body, teeth removed, or Halloran's blood-soaked truck haunts us. Psychologically, he's a case of poverty and trauma breeding a sociopath, amplified by a corrupt system. Philosophically, he's a cautionary tale. Charisma can mask evil, but betrayal catches up. As Boston moves on, for The Independent, Bulger's shadow lingers, a reminder that monsters can hide behind charm, leaving only pain in their wake.